Hey everyone, Jeff Mackerlin here, and today I'm really excited to bring a fun interview I did with my good friend Greg Koch. He's just released a new record called Blues. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more, so please check out the interview. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, so I've got Greg Koch with me, and he's got a new record out. We're going to talk about that. He's got a blues record out. So, Greg, what made you want to do a blues record? And what is blues nowadays?
Well, these are all interesting questions. For years the short answer is that I got involved with Devin Allman as a result of doing these Allman Betts family revival things, which have been a blast. And Devin and I hit it off, and he came out and saw the band when we were going through St. Louis. He's like, "Well, we should really get you in front of more people. More people need to know about what you do." I'm like, great, excellent. I'm all ears. And so he had the idea of maybe us collaborating on a few different things. So we've been kind of brainstorming. He's like, well, at first, why don't our first salvo be a compilation record? Because I've got like 20 some records out. I think my first actual CD came out in 93 or something like that, which seems like only yesterday. But as we know, Jeff, is a little bit longer ago now.
Yes.
And so I said, well, if I tried to narrow down, the best tunes, or what I thought were the best tunes from the last 20 records, it'd be very difficult because the records are kind of all over the map. I mean, there's always been, as I like to say, a soft underbelly of blues, but kind of my mission statement all along was like, yeah, I'm totally into blues. That's what I've always listened to: blues oriented rock, blues oriented jazz, blues, a few country morsels in, and all this other seasoning has come in. But I was a bona fide blues goon at a very young age. And but I thought my assignment was, if you will, Jeff, was to add other secret sauce to it to make it different. You know what I mean? To try to do your own thing with it. So I was never okay with just doing like a straight 12-bar blues. I'd be like, hey, I want to add a couple. This turnaround's going to be this, or maybe instead of going to the 4-chord, I'll go to the minor third, or whatever. Just trying to make it different. And then I thought it always need to have a bridge, the whole 9 yards, just trying to differentiate it. But it's always served to alienate myself from, blues only kind of, I've done blues festivals and things of this nature, but it's always been like, as we were talking before the camera went on, it's just like, you always have somebody yelling out after a particularly wise alecky tune, play the blues, and then that just sets me off. Just like, dude, you wouldn't know the blues if it hit you in the face. But I don't try to get, I'm not a violent soul, to be honest. But
just a quick break right here. If you could like and subscribe to my channel, it would really help me out quite a bit. Most of the people who watch my videos do not actually subscribe, so if you could do that, that'd help out a lot. Also, as a way of saying thank you, I have a free Arpeggios Unlocked ebook and mini course, and you can get that using the link above or below. I'm going to take you through how you can work through all of your arpeggios in a methodical, simple way. So please check that out on me using the link above or below.
Anyway, so as I was talking with Devin about this, I said, we get a lot of people coming to the merch table after our gigs just going, hey, what's the bluesiest CD that you have? So then I thought, well, why don't I just go through all of my records over the years and literally pick out like 3-chord blues songs, or maybe 1 or 2-chord songs. The only more complex tune, I think, is Stormy Monday, which of course has that different, walk up and turnaround. So other than that, they're just kind of straight blues songs. And of course, the Stumble has that kind of strange progression.
Were these all really recorded?
Well, all the stuff was, we had 2 tunes in the can that hadn't been released yet. So once Devin heard the songs that I had picked, he's like, boy, it'd be great if you had some unreleased stuff. And so I had, at one point during COVID, I was going to actually just put out a blues record, and I was a huge Muddy Waters fan. So we had a couple of rearrangements of a couple of Muddy songs, and I played them, Can't Be Satisfied. And he's like, this is awesome. This will be the single off the record. And then he's like, it'd be cool if we could do like a duet with somebody after the fact. So we both thought of Larry McCray because he's a friend. And so Larry McCray recorded, like, so every other verse, like I do a verse, he does a verse, and then he sent it to us and played some guitar on it as well. And we edited all that and put it on that. And Devin heard that. It's like, this is magnificent. He goes, "It'd be great if we had one more song that was unreleased." And so I had this version of "You Can't Lose What You Ain't Never Had," and I wasn't really pleased with my vocal on it. So I had mentioned to him, I was like, "Man, if we could get somebody else to sing it, that'd be great." So he's like, "Why don't we get Jimmy Hall to sing it, and we'll get the Memphis Horns to play on it?" I said, "Wicked." Yeah. So within a half hour, he had this all arranged, and then off we went. So it was, we heard those 2 tracks. I was like, "Man, this is cool shit." So all Devin really cared about was the 2 unreleased songs. He's like, "You can put whatever else on there that you want. I'm only really into, really promoting the bejesus out of those first 2 songs." So then I just kind of went back through the catalog and picked out, what I thought was a good amount of songs for the CD, and then we narrowed it down to 8 tunes for vinyl. So there's kind of 2 different iterations of this project. And then he's like, "Well, what should we call it?" And I was like, "Well, maybe we can call it Gristle Blues or, something, because that's kind of my MO or my brand, if you will." He's like, "No, this is different. We're doing something different. We're not, the Gristle's the old you. This is a new thing." And I just said, and so he came up with all these different ideas. And I said, "Why don't we just call it what it is? It's blues." So it's literally Greg Koch Blues.
And so when it's on the merch table, you go, "That's the blues CD right there."
Exactly. And when we were on this tour, people went right over. It's like, "Where's the blues record?" It's so easy, Jeff.
It's funny because I don't have a blues record. There's no blues on any of my records. And people are like, "Well, aren't you a blues guitar player?" I'm like, well, what does that mean? I'm a blues influenced guitar player. It's a really kind of fascinating world, that, isn't it? When
Well, it certainly is. I mean, I have always been a fan of the whole gamut of people's take on blues, but I gravitate towards, I do appreciate, the Ronnie Earls of the world and the Duke Robillards and,
yeah.
uh, who kinda live in that world of doing what has been done, but they have their own take on it, but it's pretty much just that, kind of, old school way of doing it. And then I'm a fan of people who, Robin Ford and the people that, take blues and, kinda, add a little bit more of a jazz element or so on. I'm into that as well. And of course, you have the myriad of rock guys that have, from, one of my favorite blues guitar players is fricking Billy Gibbons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but, typically, I mean, I still listen to a bunch and I love Albert King, and I love Albert Collins, and I was just listening to, Earl Hooker yesterday. And I love listening to Muddy Waters. I love listening to old, Howlin' Wolf stuff and so on and so forth, Magic Sam, all of these different guys. But I've never been one of these guys that has been, obsessed with the minutia of being a blues historian. I mean, I know about the guys that I like, and I can tell about the guys that I like by their vibrato, their tone, their choice in songs. Sometimes I'll listen to one of the historic blues aficionados and I can't get through the record. I'm like, well, that's not hitting me in the feels. So I have I am not someone who predicates themselves on this encyclopedic knowledge of the squads of every one of Muddy Waters iterations and so on and so forth. I like what I like, and I wanted it to inform my take on doing what I think is the most emotive form of guitar playing, which is blues guitar to me, and blues oriented rock and with a touch of jazz and so on and so forth. But the bending of the strings and the tone and the phrasing, I mean, that's what hits me in the doggone feels. I mean, I think it's about 13 years ago now. I started writing a bunch of songs with a really good singer-songwriter guy in the area here by the name of John Seeger, and he had a great band in the area called, Semi Twang, and he wrote a bunch of songs with some other folks, and he's had some tunes on various different, big name artist records, and he's just a great lyricist and, interpreter, just in kind of the Americana, R&B-ish world. And so I had this idea, and I kinda had a little bit of financial backing for a project, and the whole idea was, I'm gonna do a blues record, and I'm going to have this guy who really knows how to turn a phrase in that more kind of Americana bluesy sense, whereas all my stuff is pretty wise assy.
Sure. And that's what we love. That's what we love about
Eh,
him.
and so, but once we started writing songs, I simply, it's not that I could not, I would not write a simple 12-bar song. It's like my mission is to follow what I think is cool, and me and this guy proceeded to write like 70 songs, none of which was a 12-bar blues song. And I had various different special guests on the record. Robin was on like 4 tunes. My buddy Paul Barrere from Little Feat was on 3 songs. Bonamassa played on a song. John Cleary played, and Roscoe Beck was on it, and Brennan Temple, and all these different guys. And I really liked the way it turned out. But again, it was not easily digestible as a blues thing. And so it got, a lot of people really enjoyed it, and it remains one of those records where people, I really like that record. But it just kind of spoke to the fact that I just could not do it, just because I felt kind of just exactly what you were describing. It feels a little disingenuous to just say, "Oh, I'm going to just try to do a blues record," unless you really feel it passionately. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or what you've done on this record, where it's like a collection of the things that you've done, and you got to put them together at a few new tunes that you have your own twist on, for sure.
Exactly.
But to set out with
Exactly.
the goal of recording and writing blues tunes, and then also, like, I would need someone who writes really good lyrics, because there's nothing worse than me thinking about singing a song about working on the farm, or you know what I mean, like, so
Right.
you have to be really conscientious of the lyrical content, especially if you're going to do old tunes. Something like Stormy Monday, I think, is a universal feeling, of course, but if you're talking
Right.
about even Crossroads or something, I'm gonna go sell my soul.
Right.
One of my friends wrote a song years ago called "Got the New York Times Blues," which I just thought was just freaking brilliant. Drinking his
Right.
coffee in the morning, reading the Times, and thought that was pretty funny. But
Well, I
yeah,
never forget, years ago, I had this record called 4 Days in the South, and I recorded it at Johnny Sandlin's studio, the old Allman Brothers producer, and he was a member of Hourglass with Greg and Dwayne Allman, and he had this cool studio in the garage of his house down in Decatur, Alabama. And I had this shuffle tune, which was and I realized it as I was listening to this Earl Hooker record the other day. I was like, oh, that's right, I ripped off this progression. I mean, I changed the melody and added my own little thing of it, but it had a certain groove to it, and it had this certain chord change thing that I had nicked from Earl Hooker. But my lyric, and I'll never forget, because Johnny Sandlin was laughing, because the whole thing was, the song was about being bored to tears. And it's like, I've never heard a blues song where where the worst of it is that you're bored to
that's the best though, because I mean, like, you got to have your own experience in your life.
Exactly.
So where can people get your blues records? Because if you download it and buy it, Greg actually helps support his living, right?
Yes, correct. Well, it's kind of a multifaceted thing that I ask of people at this juncture in time, because it's been a weird journey for me in terms of as an artist, because as a way to make a living over the years, I'm, father of 4 kids. Now they're all kind of, my youngest is just turned 21, so I'm almost free from the I shouldn't say that, sounds derogatory, but you know what I mean. My responsibilities in terms of financially to these youngsters has been diminished substantially now. Um, but in the course of the last 30 years of having kids, I mean, I've done all kinds of different stuff. I've done, the Fender thing, where I was a clinician, in their words, not mine, ambassador of the brand for 15 years. Around that same time, I was doing, I rewrote the Hal Leonard guitar method with the original author, and I did a bunch of different stuff for them, and I would go out and do clinics for them. And then I started doing stuff for, obviously, Fishman. Then I started doing the Wildwood thing, which was this thing that catapulted, my popularity in terms of an online presence to things I never even imagined. I didn't foresee it, but it happened, and all well and good. But the whole time I was putting out records, I always had my own band. I would always try to tour, but obviously, because of the responsibilities of fatherhood and all that kind of stuff, I had to do what was gonna make me the most amount of money in the least amount of time, so that I could, not have my kids end up on, talk shows, and my wife, taking off with the personal trainer or something. So, uh, and so that all worked out. But What's weird now is that I go out with the band and people will come out to the gigs that are like, "Oh, I followed you from the YouTube videos," or "I'm a Wildwood fan," or "I had your Stevie Ray Vaughan DVD years ago," or "I used your Helena guitar method." However they come to the gig, they come to the gig and they're like, "Oh my god, I had no idea. This is, like, completely so much better than your online thing." And I'm like, well, this is what it's always been about for me anyway. It's always been about being an artist and trying to fit that artistry and all of these other different things that I needed to do in order to make a living. But now it's time to just that's why I've been so aggressive with going on the road is because I feel like I owe it to all that work I put in as an artist to let people know that this shit exists and and it deserves to be listened to.
I did your podcast, and thanks again for that. And we talked a lot
Pleasure.
about this sort of living as a musician in the real world, how we make these things work. And
Right.
if you've not been having a superstar megastar hit, legacy hit, even really, legacy band is the only ones who are really kind of making. And we have a parallel existence in that sense of, like, now my son is in college, like I can go on the road and I'm starting to branch out again because I wanted to be a good dad, and I wanted to be
Right.
around and I needed to make money, and I live in New York City. So that's a whole other
Yeah, it's a
level of,
whole lot of money.
yeah, exactly. So now it's that moving, starting to push things out. And it's the funniest thing I get as well, that people come to the gigs and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea you could play." Or,
Right.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, "Oh, I had no idea. Like, wow, that's like this or that." And I'm like, "Yeah." And this thing I always find really strange is, do you have my records? Because that's what's on the records. Like,
Yes.
and I'm happy that they come. I don't mean that. I just find it to be very interesting that they only know me from, like the True Fire courses or my courses, and I am extremely grateful for that. But I
I
just find it very
know.
fascinating that there's a whole other side that they don't even know exists, and you're encountering this as well, like that. And to me, that's shocking because I've known you as the guy from the records, not so much the guy, because obviously we're in the same business. But
Right.
I've had your records long before I've known you, you know, and so to me, I just find that it's just a weird element of the world of YouTube, and it's very curious thing that you're discovering this as well.
Well, I think what you're talking about, what I'm talking about, the reason why we find it so strange is because I know you're probably the same way. If you get into somebody and you research everything about that person,
Absolutely.
like, "Oh, I like this person. This can't be all that they've done." And then you do the research, you do the dive, figure out who they played with, what other records they have. "Oh, look, they got this video. Oh, look, they played with so and so." And you do the deep dive and you figure out who they are. And I guess that's so striking to us is when people say this is because that's just so not the way it is now. Everything's compartmentalized. People will find you online. And again, as you said, you're grateful that they give a shit at all,
Yeah.
right? So however they come to you, you're grateful for. But by the same token, you're always scratching your head like, man, that's just so weird that they wouldn't connect this, that, and the next thing and realize you have all this other stuff going on. But I guess that's where we're at. Yesterday, I was driving back from Minneapolis, and that's a long ass drive. And I was thinking about analogies about how online stuff is different from being in the room.
Yeah.
And and one analogy I made, which I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not that I'm judging anybody who is, but I'm not into porn. Okay, just so we're clear. But I was like, well, one analogy, which I don't like, and I'll get into a better one in a minute, was the fact that, there's online porn that people watch for whatever reason they want to watch it. And then there's actually being intimate with a member of
Yeah.
whatever sex of your approval. And that's an entirely different experience.
Yes.
And so it's kind of similar to music, but actually just me saying this is grossing me out. So I'm going to move to the other analogy.
I understand where you're going with this. Yeah.
But it's not dissimilar, like watching sports on television and being in the room,
Yeah.
or being in the arena or being in the stadium. You're still viewing what's happening, but it's an entirely different experience.
Right.
And I think that they both have their purposes, obviously. But there is an energy and a spirit and of being in the room where that stuff is actually taking place. That is obviously there's reciprocity with the crowd and the performer and I'm sure you've experienced it too when you've been at a concert and you have like this spiritual experience of like, God, that just,
Oh,
you were the right age at the right time,
yeah.
the right moment, and you connect with what happened. You're like, this was one of the greatest things I've ever heard
I just
or ever experienced.
Gilmore at Madison Square Garden. I'd never seen him before, and it was so amazing. I went again, scalp
Right.
ticket. Like I was just like, this was an experience. Like not even just the light show and all. There was something going on that stage,
Right.
and whether it's that size or it's a smaller size, and that's what gets me inspired. It's funny. I had this experience where I was seeing a well-known guitar player, and it was live, and he was just killing. It was great, with a friend of mine. It was like, damn. And then somebody posted a clip from that gig of that solo that really inspired me. I watched it back, and it wasn't nearly as exciting.
That's what my point was going to be.
Yeah, I'll be like, oh, it would whiz through this because I'd be like, it's kind of notey, whatever. But at that moment,
Right.
in the live situation, that was freaking amazing because the energy in the room was
It was appropriate for what that was.
exactly. So on a YouTube video, when I watched it back, I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize that was that kind of notey and that kind of little meandery. Like I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I was still
Sure.
yeah, but in the room, I was like, that was one of the greatest things I've ever heard. So
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that this is what we hope that people come out and see. And I get it, I think COVID really had a deep psychological effect on people going out. And I know I still kind of battle with it where I'm like, I got to get out more. Like, cause you got
Right.
used to being at home and get a little lazy, and you're like, and so when somebody comes to town, except for you, because I assume no one's be out of town when you come to town, like
It's a conspiracy.
yeah, I'm making myself go out now. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go see the King Crimson Beat thing on the weekend, and like I'm just like, okay, I'm just going, like,
Right.
because I don't want to miss it. And with Gilmore, I'm going again, just going again, because when
That's
is it going to
awesome.
happen again? Especially that one. But yeah, I'm trying to go out and step out because I usually come home pretty inspired.
I was going to mention one thing as you were mentioning the video that you watched and had a different perception of. It's always astounding to me as well as we're, kind of circling back on the other thing of people perceiving things and making judgments about a particular person based on one snapshot
Yeah.
of what they've seen. And sometimes people will see one little video and make all kinds of glaring proclamations about your lack of this, that, and the next thing without realizing, okay, where are you starting the clock from? Because if you're watching this one random video that some jamoke took without authorization and posted online,
Yeah.
without like doing the homework of realizing, well, this person actually has a whole career to pick from.
Yeah.
That's another thing astounding about the internet era, if we will, is this,
Nobody
people
knows the
just jumping
backstory.
to conclusions, watching just the smallest morsel, just like, oh, I've got that person figured out without doing any research. Well, then there's this one too, which I'm sure you've experienced, where you play something that you're like, "Oh my god, that's shit,"
Yeah.
and then people will be like, "This is the best,"
Yeah.
and you're like, "Why do I even bother?"
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, you're grateful that anyone cares. I was just thinking about how it was kind of again my long drive. I've had some long drives lately, folks. So, uh, I think about it's always fun to try to get back into your head when you were younger and how that music just affected you so much. And of course, you've years go by and you've learned how to play most of that stuff, and it doesn't quite affect you in that same virgin ears type of thing. But I remember when I was in high school. So I was in high school from 1980 to 1984, and I was a blues goon. You know what I mean? I mean, not again in that way of, "Oh, I'm gonna know more about the blues." I just was attracted to certain people who sound because to me, I was a huge Hendrix fanatic, huge Cream era fan, but then I immediately went to, BB King, Albert King, Freddie King, so on and so forth. But I gravitated towards the people who I could really hear their the footprints into Clapton and Hendrix and Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page and Dwayne Allman and Dickie Betts and Mike Bloomfield. And then my job, I thought, was to take that scrambling and try to take that and do my own thing with it, right? Um, but around the same time, Eddie Van Halen was out, right? And every guitar player that was my age was into Eddie Van Halen, and I was like, I don't really have any interest in playing that. Not that I mean, I had the first 3 Van Halen records, but I never figured out,
Me neither.
Eruption or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then Steve Morse would always win, guitar player of the year, and I had a buddy of mine who was more into kind of the prog rock thing, uh, but I don't know, but I was always not into the chops guys because to me it didn't emote the same way. But then at some point I started listening to the Dixie Dregs and I fell in love with it, right? So I was like, yeah, but musically it's awesome, right? So I got into the Dregs and then I heard Alan Holdsworth and I was like, uh, it was like a button clicked. It's one moment I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then all of a sudden, I understood the harmonies, not from actually sitting down and playing it, but just the melodies spoke to me, and I dug it. But never did I want to play like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because to me, it was all the reason why I thought Hendrix was so great, and why I continue to just, if anyone says, "Oh, Hendrix, the guitar has gone so far beyond what," it's like, no, you still don't get it. It's
No.
the tone, the intention, the phrasing, and the fact that he's connecting to something in such a non-theoretical, but just love of playing the instrument type of way that it has nothing to do with chops. It has nothing to do with a metronome. It has nothing to do with knowing the modes of the melodic minor scale. And I think that that's the thing that is sometimes the online community doesn't really get because everyone always gushes over the next Fingers McGee, who can play a million miles an hour,
Mhm.
or and that's all magnificent. I'm not saying it's got to be an either or thing, but let's also give respect for the fact that there's things that happen in dungeony rooms all around the world where musicians are playing this emotive music and connecting to an audience that is just not the same as a technical um enterprise. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you can see somebody play really great and beautifully emotive on a camera for sure. But when you see that live in the room with the audience and you're exposed to it on that level, that's what it's all about.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's why we're trying to get out and do more gigs.
That's right, because there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it. And there's nothing like plugging into a real amp on that stage and having it be just about to get away from you, the whole thing, riding the horse, you know what I mean? The buck and bronco.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we've talked about it before, on my podcast, and of course I went on the pedal show and kind of went on a little rant. I mean, I again, if people want to use digital processors, they've come a long way. I mean, back in the day when I used a Cyber Twin,
Mhm.
that shit sounded good.
Yeah, yeah.
It was only when I sat it next to my Super Reverb, I had been touring so much promoting the Cyber Twin that I hadn't really been home in a while. So I went to this gig and I brought the Cyber Twin, and then right next to it, I put a Super Reverb. And as soon as I plugged in the Super Reverb, I'm like, oh, that's right.
Well, it's the AB. You never AB.
Exactly. As long as you don't know, it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think it was funny on this tour. The first tour I had used a hot rod, with this band that I had just done in the Czech Republic, and I was just struggling with that amp because of all the things that I don't love about a hot rod. Once you're a bit spoiled,
Right.
So the keyboard player is like, whatever. It sounds like a guitar, whatever. And then this last tour, I had a Sir SL67 Plexi with a 112 cabinet with a cream back, like the deal.
Yeah.
And I play a few chords, and the keyboard player hadn't heard it in like a year. Goes, yeah, that sounds better.
Yeah.
Like he just right away. He's like,
Totally.
It just like there's no hard. I'm like, yeah, it's what a difference. You know what I mean in terms of the way you play and the way you feel about your playing, the way things interact, and all those kind of things. So yes, digital things, they're a tool. They're great. But there ain't nothing like the real deal, especially seeing it live.
Exactly. And it's interesting that, folks' perception of how loud gig, and we talked about this as well. And we're a loud band. There's just no two ways about it. And based on a given night, I will attempt, because you don't want to inflict pain. I mean, that's not the purpose, right? But sometimes you're in rooms where you're just realizing it's going to be loud no matter what. And so you do the things that you can, but then you just do your thing. And then the onus is on the crowd's like, if you're going to see a loud band, you know the place is small, bring earplugs. I mean, I went to my daughter was doing this thing where she was, right before the election, she was involved in this national campaign to just get people out to vote. The hope they would do these daybreaker things where they would have these dance parties at like, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning in all these major places and, art museums. It's all over the country. People would come and so they did one in Milwaukee and I went out. They'd always have some celebrity and, I forgot the actress's name, but she was there. Anyways, my point is there was a DJ there. It was like a dance party at 9 a.m. in the morning. And I walked in and they handed out earplugs. And before I got the earplugs in, I was like, this is so mind crushingly loud that if anyone ever complains about our band being loud again, I'm going to say, go to a rave or some kind of a dance party. But here's the thing. I put the earplugs in and I was absolutely fine. I walked in, I could enjoy the whole situation. It was not fine. I took the earplugs out and it was punishing, but it's just that simple, folks. If you're uncomfortable, put in earplugs. You can still enjoy, but that feeling of being pounded is one of the great things about seeing a band live. I mean, how many times have you been to see a band lately where it's so soft, it's like you can hear the murmur of the crowd above the band? That's not good. You wanna be able to say, "I'm here for the music, y'all can shut the fuck up," or be so eclipsed by the power of the band that your speaking is irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Alright, so the question, like the name of the video is, "What is blues?"
Well, to me, I mean, I think for other people, it's different things, but when I think about what blues is, as far as my interpretation of it is, um, it's an emotive connection that happens, it can be with any instrument, but obviously I'm a guitar player, and the blues that speaks the most to me, is guitar, of course, harp and vocals and so on and so forth, but I'm a guitar guy, right? So, there's a thing that happens, like with that old Roy Buchanan song and Albert Collins did too, when a guitar plays the blues, scary shit happens. When it's played in a certain way, you get a feeling that is there's a connection that happens, especially in a live situation, that happens over this simple format as far as harmonically speaking, that allows the person who's improvising or vocalizing, whatever the case may be, to connect with something almost otherworldly and provide a reciprocal thing with the crowd that is unlike any other genre to me. I mean, obviously you can point to jazz and so on and so forth, but there's a visceral thing that happens in this blues format. And by that I mean, simple songs, 12 bars, maybe there's a couple extra chords thrown in, maybe sometimes there's just a single chord. I mean, how many of those great, you know, Mississippi ragas have we heard? The John Lee Hooker things, the Muddy Waters thing, where there's one chord. But that to me is what the blues is really about. Now, other people will say it's about the history and it's about, class warfare, and it's about, yes, all of those things are true. But at the basis of it for me, as far as the purity of it, regardless of your socio or genetic background, is that ability to connect and have this quasi spiritual experience as a result of this simple music form that allows the purveyor to connect in a way that, as I said, is almost kind of otherworldly. Does that make sense?
It's an excellent analysis, thesis, I should say. Really, it's like a friend of mine said, when you hear somebody play, like, Skip James, you could play it to somebody who's never heard music and they would understand what was being said.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel that way. And then I think it's what I like, as you said, is about the simplicity of the chord changes is what allows that to make that connection with everybody as well. Um, yeah,
Which just reminds me of what we were talking about earlier before the camera went on. It's about how I've had people comment on the record and they really seem to be liking it, which is weird. I don't know if you've done this, but a lot of times I'll put out a record and the sales are good. A lot of people sign up for signed copies and so on and so forth. But like no one comes back and says, "Oh, I love the record." I mean, but it just, they get it. They all seem to like it, but no one says anything. You're like, I'm not that I need the positive reinforcement per se, but it doesn't hurt. Right, and with this one, I'm getting a lot more response, like, right off the bat, But I had one guy say specifically, "It's so weird to hear you play normal music." Right, and I'm taking it as but I'm like, "Well, yeah, because I always thought I should, be me and take the influences and do my own thing."
That's your superpower, dude. Like, besides being a great guitar player, it's you've mixed all these things into this unique style with your sense of humor. And that's what makes you unique, and I that's what I love about your playing, that you come through as a player through your instrument, as a person. Your
Oh,
personality
thank
comes
you.
through. And to
I
me,
try.
that's everything. That's what you want to hear. So that's a great definition of what is blues.
Obviously, other people have different perspectives, but that's everyone sees and hears things a little differently, and, that's my story, I'm sticking to it.
Good. I like it. All right. So if people want to get a hold of all your stuff, where should they go?
My website obviously is the conduit for all the things. That's just gregkoch.com, and that will lead you to all the different things that I'm doing. But, our website uses bands in town for our where we're playing. So it really helps if people sign up for that because then they'll get notifications when we're in your area. Also, if you want to, follow on Spotify or any of the other different locations where music is downloaded, every time someone subscribes and listens, of course, that has traction. And that's the kind of stuff that agents and promoters and venues and record companies care about.
Yeah.
Obviously, my YouTube channel. It was interesting. You were talking about how a lot of people segregate their instructional aspect from their musical aspect. And on my YouTube channel, it's pretty much just me doing the live streams and extemporizing. I might, post a little something of me doing educational, but it's kind of everything just kind of mismatched. But every Monday and Friday, I do a live stream on YouTube at Greg Koch Music, and it's from 4 until 5 Central Time. And when I'm on the road, my buddy Ryan usually just posts an older, you know, a replay of some sort. But when I'm in town, we try to do live things and we basically just play
Great.
and kind of converse and interact with people through Restream. We see the messages and go back and forth. And so if you want to follow the YouTube channel and check out those streams, that's awesome. Of course, Instagram, I'm pretty religious about posting every day or so, either a playing thing or some kind of commentary. And yeah, just follow all the different things and of course, I'm on Facebook and, Twitter, and now I just joined Blue Sky. Blue Sky is just Greg Koch Music. I made the mistake on X years ago of using, Man Squatch, and so no one can find and then I spelled it wrong, so, like, no one can find it, but, whatever. And then, of course, I'm also on, Threads.
Well, I'll put all your links down below, and so you guys can follow. Definitely follow Greg on YouTube, all those places as well. It's always great. And man, thanks so much for coming on. And don't forget his blues record. Check it out.
Yes, Greg Koch Blues. It's just simply stated, Greg Koch Blues. Well, listen,
Oh,
thanks so much for having me on.
yeah,
I
man. Thanks
appreciate
so
it,
much.
and I look forward to getting together in person one of these days and doing some playing. That'd
It
be
would be
fun.
awesome. That would be totally great. All right, man. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jeff.
See you, man. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Please, once again, hit the like and subscribe button. Check out my free e-course, Arpeggios Unlocked, where I get the free course and mini book using the link above or below. And I will see you all on the next video.